Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to What's Working Now. I'm your host, Katie Richardson. Today we have a really exciting and fascinating guest. His name is James Powell, and he is the host of the Spirituality podcast, where he explores spirituality and self-development with high-performing, achieving entrepreneurs, including a financial advisor to 2 times U.S. presidents, the first woman to create an iPhone app, a multi-billion-dollar business consultant, and a corporate trainer to the world's leading companies who helped grow a startup to $1 billion publicly trading in under 5 years, as well as many others. These are just some of James's clients. James is the #1 international best-selling co-author on the topic of strategic intuition. Isn't that fascinating? I'm like so excited to talk to you, James. Together with the world-renowned human behavior expert and star of the hit movie The Secret, Dr. James DeMartini. Dr. John DeMartini, not James. James has been featured as an invited guest speaker and contributor by leading global and national media publications and platforms, including Brains Magazine and the International Coach Federation. As the spirituality coach, entrepreneurs come to James to become able to make their most successful decisions in both life and business using the #1 strategy of the world's highest achieving entrepreneurs by properly unleashing the limitless but untapped potential of their mind's natural intuition. Oh, James, so good to see you. Thank you for being on the show.
Cool to be here. Thanks for having me.
James, I am just so excited to talk to you because intuition is something, without realizing it, I leaned on a lot really early on in my entrepreneurial career. And yet I was kind of embarrassed about it because nobody talked about it. So yeah. I'm really excited to talk about it with you today and like really hear more of your processes and how you, I don't know, just don't make decisions on a whim, right? Because I think people might make that assumption like, oh, I just had this thought that I should go do that thing. And then I did it. I think I have a suspicion that there's so much more to it than what people realize. And so to really get a sense for you, who you are, how you ended up here, I have a question that I would like to start out with, which is, what is an experience that you have gone through that has really formed and shaped how you see the world today?
That would be one of my earliest experiences with intuition, going back from when I was 10 years old. I've had many way more significant experiences later on in life as well in terms of implementing that. But then the first one that had a majorly positive impact on me, trusting my intuition since a very early age, was when my parents were going through the process of getting divorced, and they would take my siblings and I to child counseling. And I have 3 siblings, and they were deemed fixed. You know, they said, okay, you don't need to go anymore, but they continued taking me because I was more unusual. I wouldn't easily accept or kind of accept the narrative, and I was questioning and stuff like that. So they took me to this one counseling session in particular, and there were 2 child psychologists that were in the room with my parents, and they're trying to coax me to come into the room with them. But I felt this overwhelming sensation of being deceived. And I was staring at this mirror on the left wall, right? I was only 10. I didn't watch any movies, didn't know about any two-way mirrors or anything like that. I just had this overwhelming sensation that they were lying to me and I was being deceived. They wanted me to do something that they weren't telling me about. And I felt also the same feeling also coming from this mirror. And I was staring at it. So this psychologist, after a few minutes, walked over to me, put his hand on my shoulder and said, James, do you want to see what's behind the mirror? And I silently nodded my head. He took me out of the room, along the corridor, into the next room, the adjacent room. It was darkened. He turned the lights on. There was a third psychologist, a lady with a notepad and pen taking notes. And there were 2 men operating these big old VHS cassette camcorders, the TV style, the big ones, right, on metal tripods. 2 of them filming through what I could now see was the one-way mirror into the room where they were trying to get me to go. And that just showed me at a young age, when I was, very, very young, like that I can trust my intuition, that it's accurate and reliable. Basically, 3 child psychologists proved my intuition was accurate and reliable in clinical settings. And they also taught me that I can't rely on my parents. I can't trust them to raise me, because if they understood how, they wouldn't be taking me to such situations to try to understand me. They would know how to raise me, but they didn't. And I couldn't then freely communicate my experiences with my parents because they would misunderstand and misdiagnose and all those kind of things. I was guided to avoid these diagnoses that are very often attributed to people who have other senses, intuitional experiences. by so-called professionals who don't understand that. They look at things
Yeah.
empirically, and things are just all, physical things, but there's a lot more to life than that. And it's been able to acquire this actionable intelligence, this accurate information about things with
Mhm.
intuition that is then also proven to be true, or which you then discover to be true. That is the key in what I do. It's not about guesswork, like you were saying, about making decisions on a whim. It's not about
Mhm.
that, which is actually what a lot of people perceive intuition as being, is about guesswork. It's like
Yeah.
random feeling your way through randomly changing sets of circumstances, and but that's the most basic level, is based on emotion and
Yeah.
feeling, because emotion and intuition are not equivalent. And when you make high level decisions, you need to remove emotion from it, from that decision
Mm.
making process. But
Mhm.
pretty much everybody's teaching emotion and intuition together like the same thing, but it's just not how it works.
Mm. Well, help us see that separation. I have so many questions for you. Help us see that separation between emotion and intuition. Like, intuition is some sort of a sensation, some sort of a signal that you're getting. So how do you differentiate between emotion and intuition?
Yeah, so first of all, I'd like to clarify the difference between emotion and feeling. So emotions are in your mind, and feelings are when those emotions are manifested physically in your body. So
Mm.
when you have a thought which is based on what you value, because what you value the most, you think about the most, and those thoughts stimulate corresponding emotions, uh, which release neural hormones from your brain, from a hypothalamus gland, and they go into your bloodstream and enter every single cell. And there's a receptor for every cell that receives these particular neural hormones. They're called peptides. That proteins of combinations of 21 amino acids in different sequences according to your emotional state. And there's like two predominant variations. There's a positive, life-giving neural hormones, and the ones which are detrimental to your health and well-being. And based on the information content of those neural hormones, these molecules, essentially those instructions go to your cells and tell your cells how to behave, or how the genes are to be expressed within those cells, and it's epigenetics. And there are variations in those two themes, right? And the so when those emotions are translated into those that chemical information that goes into your cells,
Mhm.
and those cells change their behavior, which means the organ is affected, which means your body is affected, and so it's macroly expressed in your body. That's when it becomes a physical feeling. You can feel the emotion physically in your body. It's when your body actually
Wow.
changes. And so it is possible to know what to do based on feelings in the body, because that's when it becomes like you can feel it, right?
Well, I
And
love
then
what you're saying is, like, I think sometimes we miscategorize feelings as
mm,
just as not real information. But as you describe that chain of events, there's like it's real tangible information that
mm,
can become actionable. It's not just some whim.
100%. This is what I want to help people
Yeah.
understand, is the flow of intuition, and this thing with the feeling at the end, that when it's physically manifested in the body, that's the last step. That's the instinct, like in the gut, right? We have the gut
Hmm.
instinct, and there's
Hmm.
neurons in the gut, right? But there's also neurons in the heart and neurons in the brain. So essentially, our system, our conscious system, is a three-part system. It's a heart, brain, and gut, and they're
Hmm.
interconnected. And they send electrical information between each other. And in terms of the amount of electrical information that's sent between them, the heart is predominant. It sends more information to the brain than the brain sends to the heart. And then it goes from the
Wow.
brain to the gut, right? So the heart is intuition. That's where we perceive things and receive information, and even in advance of things. And then that information which we receive is then sent to the brain, which is where the intellect is. So it goes from intuition to intellect. And that's why we reason and make sense of it. Most people second guess or doubt what they've received, and so then it never goes to the gut instinct, which is where it's put into action. But then also reversely, a lot of people feel the instinct. It's the thing that they're most in touch with, and it's the closest part of our mind to our body, is where the will is, in the gut. It's the action center. And so people kind of interpret, this is what people do. They say, I've got this instinct, or this feeling, this gut feeling I need to do something.
Hmm.
They don't
Yeah.
actually understand what it is, but they just got a feeling they need to do something, in that general direction, right? Whereas if you take it a couple of steps back, and you're able to interpret that information through your intellect and your heart, you're able to understand what you're receiving. But then if you can train your intuition as well as a core skill set, you're then able to understand what you're receiving by intellectualizing it and putting your understanding back into your heart, back into your intuition, with a high resolution understanding, and you keep cycling it through your intuition, intellect to get more
Mhm.
accurate, more actionable, specific information, and then you can put it into action with your instinct, right?
So are you saying intuition is actually a skill that we can develop?
100%, everybody's
Love
born with it.
this. Yeah,
Everybody's born with it. I mean, everybody has the metrics of potential to different levels of, there's,
sure.
we've got heart, emotion, intellect, and will, and these are all different levels of potential for each person, but everybody has them. And the thing with the specific, or particularly the Western education system and social system growing up, is mostly based on intellect, but not even intelligence. It's
Yes.
mostly memorization, right?
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
so,
And it's so unfortunate. Like we have this whole body that has all of these capabilities and ability to send and receive signals like you're talking about. And yet the world only recognizes and values the brain. And I think it's so unfortunate because we are so much more than just a brain. And when we can understand all of these faculties, right, and put them into action, and you're doing an incredible job of helping us see how it all can work in synchronicity. Is there something that happens to us when we are shutting down those other signals and intuition? What can happen when we're not recognizing those gut feelings or recognizing what we're feeling in our heart?
Yeah, information overload and decision fatigue are two major side effects and negative side effects of not being able to properly listen to your intuition, to your heart. That's what people mean when they say listen to your heart, follow your heart. It's actually, what is your intuition telling you? What's the information that you're receiving there? And that, when you intellectualize things too much, that's when you become tired, right? Mentally tired and fatigued, because we're only capable of making so many effective decisions throughout a day, within a waking cycle before we need to go to sleep. And that's yeah, and that takes a lot of effort, because intellect is mostly an active process when you're trying to brainstorm and think things through by yourself and work things out rationally. Doing a pro con
Yeah.
list and what are my options, weighing up the benefits and everything. And I give an example, like with Elon Musk recently, purchased Twitter for $44 billion, but he put in the offer for $43 billion, and he was being interviewed by Chris Anderson on TEDx about his decision to make that offer. And Chris was pushing Elon like 3-4 times to find a deeper reason why he made this offer, because Chris already expressed that Elon already did his pro con list, already many months before. So he was aware of all these benefits, that he wanted to open source the algorithm and democratize the platform, as well as the potential risks, as well as just going to generate loads of negativity for him, that he's going to be haters and everything, right, on a big level. And so he was already aware of this a long time ago. So Chris wanted to find out what was the actual reason, that made him make this final decision to do it now. And after pushing him, Elon stated that it was his strong intuitive sense,
Wow.
right, to make one of the largest purchases in history, right? And that's a common theme. Jeff Bezos, he said that all of his best decisions in business and in life were made with heart, intuition, and gut, not analysis. Oprah Winfrey said the only time she ever made mistakes was when she didn't listen to the voice of her intuition. This is just a common theme. But like you said earlier, most people are not aware of it. And this is the main problem, that because first of all, we get trained out of our intuition. It's not that we just don't practice it. We get trained out of it. Actually, it's an active process. And because it's such a powerful thing. And so, that we get trained out of that through our experiences growing up, educational, social, familial environments. And then, and then we just never become aware that it's a thing that we need. And, it's actually the number one decision-making strategy of the world's highest achievers. And it's actually the reason why they became the world's highest achievers, right? Is because they're able to use their intuition. They discovered how it works, right?
So good. What does that word mean, intuition? And what is your perspective on, because what I'm hearing you say is our body's receiving signals. So like, where in your perspective are those signals coming from? How does that work?
Yeah, there's a few different sources. Great question. So it's, the heart has the largest and strongest electromagnetic field in the body, right? It's many thousands of times stronger than the brains, right? We can measure the brain waves, which is electromagnetism, that extends outside the skull. We can measure it with electrosonograph machines, right? Electrodes on the skull. And the heart's electromagnetic field is thousands of times more powerful, and it extends outside the body by up to 2 meters, right? Radius, right? From the center outwards. So whenever you're within this radius of other people's heart fields, which is an actual electromagnetic field that is measurable, it's physically, scientifically proven it. The frequency and everything is all measured, and it actually fluctuates depending on your emotional state. Like I was saying about the neural hormones that are produced by our values, and thoughts, and emotions that go through the bloodstream, create feelings which are the physical changes that happen in the body as a result of those, and that's like changing the strength or the size or shape of a magnet. So you're changing the magnetic field that it produces, right? And it's the same for the heart. So when you're within close proximity with someone else, you can feel their heart, their energy, and what's going on inside them, and even interpret that with experience into the specific emotions and even thoughts that are going on with them. And that's kind of the foundation of telepathy and stuff like that, where you can basically walk down the street with a friend and you just kind of become aware of something that they're thinking about, say it to them, and they're like, wow, how did you know? All right. And it's because you're communicating electrical information via your very substantial electromagnetic fields that are being generated from your heart and are connected to your mind. And this is exactly the same process by which we transmit information and energy through between devices, right? With either near field communication with two phones, or with wireless charging, right? Where you have to first of all turn those features on, which basically means they're setting up an electromagnetic field on the same frequency as each other as radio, but radio is simply another a frequency of electromagnetism. And they set up an electromagnetic field on the same frequency so that when you put them in close proximity to each other, they overlap and they function as one. They achieve what's called coupling, right? Where they become one field on account of their frequency, like two tuner forks resonating in harmony, right? They're basically functioning as one. And then you're able to transmit information and energy between the system, right? It's not from one phone to another, but it's actually from one part of the same field to another part of the same field, since they achieved coupling or unity, right? Harmonization. So that's how, we're able to receive information. It depends upon the frequency that we generate from the electromagnetic field that is being produced by our heart, and then what source of information that resonates with, and with what we're able to achieve coupling. And so that we can achieve this from people, we can achieve it from source, God, and there's also sources of information within us as well, like ancestors, loved ones in the spirit world who want to help us, so.
This is so fascinating, James. I love this. Are there times when our heart can be closed off and not radiating this magnetic field, and what are potential contributors to like closing ourselves off?
Yeah, fantastic question. When I was 14, I watched a couple of documentaries or movies where people were misdiagnosed with some kind of, problems, and they were put into like protective environments where they would either be drugged up or put on electroshock therapy and stuff because they were misdiagnosed with problems, whereas they were spiritually or intuitively sensitive. And so I was guided to avoid that. One way by intuitively I was guided to avoid that. First of all, just by not telling anybody about my experiences, and then leaving home at age 14 as well, so I could change my environments and really explore this. And that's why I never grew out of it, because I dived deeper into it. I give myself the freedom to do that. And so when I was 14, just before I left home, I realized that was a risk. Then I basically asked God. I made a contract. I said, look, if it's good for you, if I can help someone for you, or I can help someone, for me, or whatever. If it's a good purpose, then I'll be open to that. But otherwise, I just want to be closed down, and like I don't want to be spiritually or intuitively open or sensitive. And so my default state is actually closed, and so then because of that, I've learned how to open it up at will. And it did take practice as well, but I've learned shortcuts along the way, and that's part of what my program is about. Intuition Hacks. It's not, it doesn't take effort, but it's a significant shortcut based on my decade of experience of doing this since I was a young child. And but then what I used to do as well for very quick shutdowns basically was eating something heavy, like a dense meat, basically. So I used to eat pork pies a lot. And because when you digest food, right, if you imagine when you have a large meal and you become lethargic, right, because certain systems close down because it's focusing on the digestion. So your focus and conscious awareness becomes more physical then, right? So what I used to do when I felt like I needed to close down. Maybe I was just too excited, or I was just up. I I just ate a whole bunch of heavy food, and it just forced my body to start shutting systems down, and yeah, it just didn't take any effort. I just ate a bunch of food.
Which kind of explains why so many faiths and religions use fasting, right? And like from a young
Mm,
age, in my own faith, we did fasting. And from a young age, I just thought it was killing me. But
mm,
what I'm hearing you say, and I've experienced this too as I've matured and grown up, that when you're not focused on, when your body systems are not heavily digesting food, right? And
mm,
focused on that,
mm.
your body is able to be more open and receive. And I even just feel actually more energized a lot of the time when I'm fasting.
Yeah.
And it sounds really relevant to what you're talking about.
Yeah, I'm currently fasting now. I'm doing 12 hours a day from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. And I'm
Okay.
doing that for 40 days. And I've done 7-day fast before, um, like just water only, nothing else. And it definitely has an effect. It's something that needs to be worked up to, not that you can just jump in straight away.
Mm-hmm.
And like I remember the first time I experimented with it was when I was working, this was going back a long time, maybe 20 years. I used to work night shifts, 10-hour night shifts in the supermarket over the weekend because I would earn
Mm-hmm.
more in the nights and on the weekends than I would working in a full week in the day. So then
Wow.
I would only work 3 nights, but I would have like, I would switch my sleeping patterns the rest of the week. So I would then be awake 4 days of the week and then switch my sleeping. So I'd be working during the night, 3 days on the weekend.
Yeah.
I did that for 2 years, and during this time, I just felt like I was going to the toilet too much, and I was like, this feels like such a waste of time. Just like just doing that so often, even though it's like a normal human function. But then I had an intuition that said, well, if you don't want to go to the toilet, then don't eat. I thought, okay, I'll try that. Um, so I just didn't eat. This was like just a raw experiment. I've done it way more
Yeah.
structured since then, and there's certain principles that need to be followed to do it safely. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but but I managed 5 days, and I was flying. Really, I was just there was like
Wow.
zero lag between my thoughts and my body. Like I was thinking,
Mm-hmm.
like to go somewhere, and I was just instantly doing it, and I had some crazy experiences where this one time, and these things happen as well, that this was the only time I did it, that I did the fasting, and the only time in those 2 years when there was a party, in a staff party in the supermarket, and there was loads of food, right, left over from the party that was there during the night on the tables, and the shift manager was like, yeah, go on, you can eat all of it. And I'm like, I just committed myself to fast, right? And it's like that happened. So but then I could see the walls and everything. I could see everything made out of light, like everything. Like if you understand just a little bit about quantum physics, you'll learn that everything is made out of light at different densities, and I could see the structure of the walls of the light that it was made of from my position in the staff room on the seat where I was sitting, and I could also see on the other side of the walls along the
Mm-hmm.
corridor into the
Mm-hmm.
shop, and I could see, because this was, I think, an hour before the shop closed, and there were two staff members walking through the corridor on the other side of the wall, which I could see, right,
Wow.
because of all, I could see the different layers of light. But
Yeah.
then my senses closed down, became physical, and these two people walked through the door,
Wow.
and I'm like, that's pretty awesome. So,
Yeah.
but it's like, I've used that also since then. It's just one way you can
Mm-hmm.
identify things that are going on in people's bodies and stuff, but
Mm-hmm.
there's ways to do that safely. That was just an experiment, and it's I've had a lot of kind of dangerous situations, that potentially dangerous experiences too, that could have resulted in like in me not being here anymore, basically. It's
Mm-hmm.
very risky if it's not done properly. And I'm grateful that I've had a lot of training and mentorship growing up as well, because since I left home at age 14, I got recognized by some spiritual professionals who invited me to tour the UK with them.
Wow.
I spoke from stages as well in my teens, and I got trained by a lot of different people, spiritual coaches,
Mm-hmm.
for free at different events as well, where I got
Wow.
invited as a guest of the professional. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I received a lot of training, which was really helpful. That it's necessary as well, because otherwise trying to do it by guesswork and just like we're talking, feeling your way through it, it's not going to work, and it's too risky.
Yeah. I think sometimes we can imagine, if we had this skill set that you have, James, then we would be able to avoid danger, we'd be able to avoid financial disaster, we'd be able to avoid any sort of potential health or disease issues.
Mm,
And you had shared with me personally that you actually had cancer multiple times.
mm.
How did your, and like, so obviously life happens to everybody, even somebody who's really skilled at intuition.
Mm.
How did you utilize your intuition during that process?
Yeah, that was an extremely lonely time as well, because I have always felt a presence around me, like a
Mm,
supportive, warm, loving feeling that has always been there to help me. During those 3 years when I experienced cancer 3 times, in those 3 years, I felt that I was that warm feeling that had left me, and I felt
wow.
all alone. It was like the only way through is to do this myself, to take what
Wow.
I've learned, discovered, and been trained on, and there's always one of these moments, at least one, for some people, many, to you know how's the way to say to express this? It's where the only way through is for you to fulfill your potential,
Mm,
and usually that one thing, and it's all about focus and concentration and effort, and um I could have died, 3 times.
yeah.
So the first time that happened was after I went abroad. I was volunteering. I went abroad volunteering in Eastern Europe and South Korea for 3 years, and then I came back to the UK. I had a swollen testicle, so I went to the doctor to get it checked out. It was just visible, right? I could see that. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, and then they said that I had cancer, and they scheduled an operation within 2 weeks. So I had an operation,
Wow.
and they said that it was like super late stage, and that was like probably the latest that could have been done at. And so then I said, okay, you're good to go. They put me on painkillers, which I don't like taking medication or anything, and especially since doing
Sure.
like tons of meditation for several hours a day for many months, that I never got sick from it, from anything like. And so I stopped taking the painkillers. I was back on them within a few hours. It was very painful. and
Wow.
uh, and then I was having 6 month checkups, and I went to one of my checkups 2 months early because of my intuition. I got this very specific intuition that I should go back to get a test because the cancer came back. And they
Mm.
told me that I don't need to come back for another 2 months. And I would just reaffirm them. I said, yeah, I know, I understand, but can you check me? And they said, okay. So they checked me, and they confirmed it came back, and said that if I had waited until my appointment 2 months later, it would be too late to treat me and I would already be dead.
Sheesh.
Yeah,
Wow.
exactly. Because they said the fastest that they saw cancer growing before was doubling per week, but mine was tripling. So,
Wow.
that was unprecedented. I've got the letter here as well.
Wow.
And I'll read the letter out. So this is from my medical records, right? And it's from one doctor to another. So from September 2012, offered chemotherapy, but patient wishes to defer until November. I would like to make you aware of this patient. I just had a long discussion with him, during which he explained that he would wish to delay his chemotherapy until November. I have expressed in the strongest possible terms, this is where I start getting emotional,
Mm.
that this may turn a curable situation into an incurable one, and that he may die as a result of his actions. Despite this, he wishes to delay his treatment. While I hope he will survive until 2nd of November 2011, and what's that? I think is that a typo? Yeah, because a different year, maybe. And indeed still be in a position where he could still be treated with chemotherapy. I wanted to make you aware of the situation with him. As far as I could in clinic today, I've assessed his competency, and I have no reason to believe that he is not competent to make this decision. And it's cool that he ended that with that statement, because
Wow.
it's about a decision, right? And I made
Mm.
that decision, first of all, to go to the appointment 2 months early. And even though they said I don't need to, I insisted, and they confirmed that I came back. And then they told me that if I don't do chemotherapy within 2 weeks, I would die, like
Wow.
with basically in less than 2 months. And so I said no because of my intuition. I already knew that I was going to say no. My father came to the appointment with me, and he was crying and begging me to do it, and he was like breaking down. His son's going to die, and because I went through it once, and now he couldn't handle it anymore.
Mm.
I actually had to ask him to be quiet. Right.
Wow.
I couldn't allow
Wow.
myself to even be sensitive to even my father's emotions, because I had to focus on staying true to my intuition.
Hmm.
And you can you can imagine how how bad that was for him.
Yeah. Are there things that somebody can do to, like, as you describe that whole scenario, I can only imagine the level of conviction and courage it takes to be when you have doctors and experts and even your own father recommending something else. Like, what have you done in your life to really trust your intuition and then therefore speak up for yourself? What are some things that you've done to grow that conviction?
Yeah, so it's not that it takes effort to have conviction in making decisions with intuition. It's that, at least with my experience, it's the experience itself. It's the empirical evidence that I see around me, that how it's manifested for me, and part of the signals that, first of all, it's what I receive in my intuition, right? So in
Okay.
intuition, like inside you, and so that's with what you receive in your heart, from God, primarily, from angels, from your loved ones in in the next world, and then there's also the things that people say to you. So I have a condition on that it must be at least two or three people who are separated from each other. They're not related in any way in each other's lives, but they're saying the same thing to you that you're already feeling or listening to in your heart, right? So three
Yeah.
unrelated people say the same thing that you're already thinking in your heart. And usually also within a 2-3 day time period as well. So it's even more high level of improbability on this happening, right? And then there's also things that you see in your environment, physical objects that are around you in your environment. So, for example, one day I was walking down the street again, like a couple of maybe 15 years ago. I was asking, should I get a job based on my skills, something I enjoy, or something just for money, right? Because I'm great at sales, I could do that and get loads more money. But I already did that. I wanted to try something else. Literally in that one moment, this truck came past on the street. I took a photo of it, and on the side of the truck, skills. Right? Right? That's
That's
crazy.
awesome.
Because
Yeah.
there was also a side street on a residential area. This truck has got no business being there, and yet, literally
It's a
that one moment,
moving billboard with your answer to prayer. I
yeah,
love that.
it's
That's
crazy, right? And
amazing.
it's like,
Yeah.
but there's a point where you can just bring it down to just what you're receiving in your heart, because with so much experience, for example, it's also so many little things. Like this is one thing I train people to do is many small decisions throughout the day. For example, I would wake up. I did this recently as well, and I would wake up in the morning. I just and this one particular experience going back a number of years when I I was living in my flat. I use these examples because I did a lot of experiments. There's a lot of trial and error during this time, and these were like the pivotal moments, like the first time I experienced these things, right? Which is really cool to recollect. And this one time I woke up and I had this leaflet in my house of this eco village, which I wanted to visit one day, and I picked it up and I felt like someone's going to want this today, so I just put it in my back pocket. I went into town. I was walking around. I did my business in town for a couple of hours, and then brought it out of my pocket and I asked, okay, where's the person who wants this? And I was walking around town. Should I go left here? Should I go right here? Should I go straight? Making decisions on which directions to go. And like the whole town is pedestrianized, right? So I was just walking around and following my intuition, asking questions, getting an answer. And then I ended up waiting inside an indoor market, like not a supermarket, but like a market with multiple stalls, with farmers
Okay.
and everything inside, right? And there was one stall in the corner where I just waited and was hanging around, and I was saying to myself, I might get kind of security might come over here for me loitering or something, right? But I just hang around there, and this person came up and spoke to that particular stall owner, asking if they knew where this eco village is. And I just took the leaflet out of my pocket and said, "Here you go. This is for you."
Oh my word.
Right? And just like so many of those things, just constantly, all of the time. It's
So
just
what I'm hearing you say is, like, I asked, how did you have the conviction to trust your intuition? And what I'm hearing you say is, in that moment with the doctors and your father and everyone's telling you the opposite, you had very clear messages telling you, instructing you that doing chemotherapy was not the right move for you. And so it required, I guess, less conviction because you literally had those answers and the clarity on what the next move for you was, and that was to not do the chemotherapy. Is that what you're saying?
I already knew that I was going to say no before I went there.
Wow.
So it wasn't that I needed to go there to make a decision, but I already knew.
Mhm.
And it's because, and for that decision, I didn't even receive external signals so much. That particular decision to go to the appointment first, 2 months early, that one I received also signals from other people and the things that they were saying. Like, for example, 3 people unrelated to each other within a very short time window were each asking me, "Hey, James, how's your health?"
Mm.
Right? Very
Mhm.
unusual way that they were asking me, like with the tonality and everything. And also, it's
Mhm.
unusual that they asked me at the same time. And then, and this was also what I was thinking in my heart too. Like there was this voice saying, "How's your health, James?" And but then also in terms of physical objects in my environment, I didn't have that. Those 2 things were enough. But before I went to the appointment, where I actually said no to chemotherapy, that was just my heart. I already knew at that time, like just based on what I received in my heart. So it's it the conviction happens. It's the same like having confidence. I see
Mhm.
confidence as a tool a person uses, because I've been through this myself, a tool a person uses to replace them naturally being themselves until they can naturally express themselves. Now, some
Mm.
people might say that when you can freely express yourself, that's confidence, but I see it a little bit different. I see confidence like when you're being confident, it's like you're using this tool to kind of motivate or inspire you
Mhm.
to be who you want to be, but it's
Mhm.
not fully natural yet. And
Mm.
it's not like a good habit in a way, right? You haven't trained your neurons to basically just allow that to flow. So it takes time for that to happen, right? And so with conviction, it first comes down to knowing that this is possible, and how it works is a very big one as well. And that's why I like to describe the processes of things, because it removes doubt when people can
Mm.
understand the flow of intuition. And we were talking about the
Mhm.
neural hormones and everything like that. And I go into a lot more detail about this, also in terms of manifesting as well, in creating a result, co-creating results, with God in
Mhm.
our life. That that you know ask and it will be open to you, right? There's just it's a common thing in the Bible, and it's like,
Yeah.
you got to be able to ask excellent questions. you know
Yeah.
don't just ask anything. You got to
Yeah.
be able, it's about intuition but also intellect. You've got to be able to formulate those excellent questions, because the
Yeah.
quality of the answers you receive depends upon the quality of the answers that you ask.
Yeah.
And it's the same, like the quality of the outcomes you receive depends upon the quality of your decisions. And so it's a well balanced intuition, intellect, and instinct. Is action, heart, intellect, action, is all of them.
Mhm. There's all these different ways that you're receiving signals and messages and noticing things. Are there things that you're tactically doing in your life to kind of organize all of these things? I don't know if it's like writing things down in a certain way or categorizing them, but like, you talked about noticing within a short amount of time, several people asking you the same question. Like, is
Mm.
that all just floating around in your head, or are there ways that you're taking these bits of information and collecting them in a way that you can kind of organize it and make sense?
Yeah, what I used to do is I used to keep a notepad on me all the time, just a pocket-sized notepad, and I would
Mm,
keep notes all the time. And I don't do that anymore, because I've intentionally limited my options of what I'm focusing on, so that I can be more productive in my chosen desires at this stage of my life. Whereas
mm,
before, I would, uh, particularly when I'm working on a project where I'm, like for example, I was studying science for a long time, to like, and making discoveries in science too based on intuitive revelations, which I would then search online, and actually find out this is real stuff, in order to include in my content that I teach. And I would receive specific words and search them online, and what I was looking for is the first item on the top of the list, right, in the search results.
mm,
uh, and when I do a lot of research like that, which could be applied in coaching for clients, when you want to discover things about a client, and which they're maybe not telling you, but which is going to help them, right, to
mm,
to kind of get to, then you can keep a notepad specifically for that person and just write all your notes down about them. that all of them which come through, and then you can analyze those later as well after you've written them all down, and just carry it around with you. So that's very helpful. The thing that's going on for me right now is that I've already done a lot of the empirical research about my current activities in terms of business and everything. So I've already learned the strategies that I need to apply and all these things, right? And
Mhm.
so because I've done that, I'm not in a researching phase as much as I would be when I'm learning.
Okay.
Whereas now it's more about application.
Yeah.
So the way that I use intuition now is, what is the best action for me to take in my current state at this time of the day, right?
Mm.
That's a big question, because we have natural biorhythms that, like with the
Yes.
sleep-wake cycle, but also with the hormones in the body, where we peak at
Mhm.
different levels depending upon whether or not we're in a service mode with our hearts, giving love and service, or we're in an emotional state, which is more reciprocal with people, forming relationships. And or if we're more intellect based, right, we're thinking and analyzing, or if we're in a will-centered mode, which is more taking action and just being more physical. It could be doing sports or something healthy. So it really depends. It takes time to analyze those cycles, and keeping loads of detailed records and notes and everything. But using intuition is a very big shortcut to understanding the optimal activity for you to be doing in this particular moment. And that's really, intuition is a huge shortcut for everything. It's like my podcast, right? I
Mhm.
When I finished a previous project, I asked the question, what next? And I got the specific detailed information. The Spirituality Podcast, 1 episode per week, explores spirituality and self-development with high-achieving entrepreneurs. Okay,
Love it.
that's what I'm talking about, right? And so
Mhm.
then I looked online, the spiritualitypodcast.com is available. Can you imagine, nobody ever bought that before, right? So I bought it. So, and then I started inviting people, and pre-launch, I've interviewed some of the most successful people on the planet. And
Mm.
why? I've got no audience or listeners, but they said yes, because I used my intuition. I didn't brainstorm or think things through. I didn't do my
Mm.
pro con list or anything. I went directly to the answer, to the next best thing.
So good. So good. So good. James, what I'm hearing you say is the answers are there and we're just getting in our own way. We're disrupting the signals. We're not paying attention to them. We haven't trained our mind, our heart, our gut to pay attention to those things. And if we really would use more than just our brain and
Mm,
be willing to take action on those impressions, those thoughts, those signals that we're getting in all different forms. And you've shared a lot of really incredible examples. Like when we do those things, a lot of times what I say to my clients is to do that. A lot of times it feels like you're stepping into the dark because it's new, it's unknown,
mm,
and maybe
yeah.
everyone around you is saying something different. But what I've experienced in my life is, as I make that decision to step into the dark, when
Mm,
I walk into that dark room, like I have light and the light shines into the darkness, and all of a sudden what felt unknown and scary, all of a sudden now you can see inside that room. And we kind of broke out of the old patterns, the old things that were keeping us stuck. And I'm really excited for the rest of my day after talking to you, and like really on a new level. I feel like I have a developed ability to listen to and understand my intuition, but you've shared some
mm.
really incredible things that I've never heard before. And I think I'm making new connections and excited about, yeah, all kinds of possibility opening up. So thank you so much for sharing so much. I could talk to you for like 5 more hours. It
Yeah,
was
yeah, easily could
absolutely
do that.
amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, you're talking about light, and that's the whole thing. We're talking about electromagnetism as emitted from the heart, right? Which is a measurable phenomena. Electromagnetism is light, right? And
Mm,
it's the same as emanated from the brain, right? It's the light has infinite range across the entire universe, right? The electromagnetic field, right? Infinite range, and a single photon, a single particle of light can contain infinite information, right?
wow.
That's what we're talking about, right? Being able to access information, actionable intelligence through the heart, which is intuition, via the electromagnetic light that permeates the entire universe, right? Which comes from source, which also is light. I describe God as the original photon, basically, because even in the Bible, God's described as a ball of light, and many people who've experienced God visually have described God as that. And the sphere is a perfect shape, right? It's a perfect distribution of light, and there's information and energy within that light. We're able to access that through our heart, and that's the beauty of it. And the one of the cool things that I'm able to do with my intuition hacks is help people access the actionable intelligence with zero experience, without needing to develop their intuition, without any training or development, because I've discovered a set of steps that people can implement. They do those steps and they get results, and I've got amazing feedback from my clients already for that. It's both intuition to get actionable intelligence, but also a co-creative and manifestation process too. And it's crazy the things I've been able to achieve with this. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing at the moment as well, in terms of some of my activities. Like I did one for a period of time, and literally on the last day, the goal of it was to meet someone who can show me how to get the money I need to fund one of my other projects, right? Which I was given a goal to fund it to $1 million. Right? I asked a professional in the TV and film industry, what do you think? Because it's a media related project. Like, what do you think I would need for this? And he said $1 million. I said, okay, great. So I did this thing for a period of time to meet someone who can show me to get $1 million for this project. So that's easier than just manifesting $1 million straight up, right?
Yeah.
And literally on the last day, this gentleman reached out to me via LinkedIn. I said, hey, James, how are you? I could have just ignored it. It seemed an unassuming message.
Yeah.
Intuition said, do it. And then this gentleman is, he's a world-class corporate trainer. He's trained all of the companies in the world, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, all these companies. And from what I learned from that gentleman, my project is now funded to $1 million. Actually, it happened within a couple of months.
Get out.
So, that's pretty awesome. And so that's possible with a set of steps, right? You can do that without any experience or training. But then I also show you how to develop your core intuition itself, like develop a skill set. So you don't need to go through a set of steps every single time. You can just spontaneously in the moment, like with my podcast, get the information like immediately.
So amazing. So if somebody's wanting to learn more about these programs that you're talking about, get your help, what's the best way for people to get to connect with you?
Yeah, the best way is through my newsletter for my podcast. So I send out emails about this. So you can sign up there at thespiritualitypodcast.com. There's a newsletter sign up form right at the top. Just name an email address, very simple. And that's where I distribute all my my content, my invitations as well.
Okay, fantastic. Thespiritualitypodcast.com. James, this was amazing. I don't even know how you and I got connected, but I'm just so grateful that we're here. It was Facebook, actually. Thank you, Facebook. Yeah, like this was just a fabulous conversation. I really hope that our listeners right now are seeing the world through new eyes and paying attention to the signals, the messages that their heart, their gut are sending to them and their brain, right? And understanding how to prioritize those things and put it into action. So I'm going to invite everybody right now who's listening. What are you hearing for you? And how can you put that into action? James has shared some really exciting, fascinating information. And I know that you listening to this was not an accident. So there's something here for you. And what is that specifically? And how can you take action on that? James, thank you so much. This has just been fantastic. And for everybody listening, this is What's Working Now.